My father was a high school shop teacher for 31 years, and the one thing he repeated every single time I made a mistake was this: the right call is usually the uncomfortable one. I thought about that a lot during the weeks after I found a woman crying on a bench outside a hospital at 11:30 on a Tuesday night. My name is Declan Ford. I'm a physical therapist at a mid-sized sports rehab clinic in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was 34 years old when this happened. I drove a 10-year-old Civic, rented a one-bedroom apartment near the NODA neighborhood, and spent most of my evenings either at the gym or watching whatever game was on. I was not the kind of person things happened to. I kept my head down and did my work, and that was mostly enough for me. The Tuesday in question, I had stayed late finishing notes on a post-surgical ACL patient who was making slow progress. When I finally walked out to the parking deck, I took the shortcut through the small courtyard between the main building and the outpatient wing. That's where I saw her. She was sitting on one of those stone benches near the fountain they never actually turn on. She had a nice coat on, dark green, the kind that cost more than my car payment. Her heels were off. One of them had tipped over on its side. She was holding her phone in her lap with both hands, and she wasn't crying anymore, or she'd just stopped, but her mascara had made a mess of the space under her eyes, and she looked like someone who had run entirely out of ideas. I almost kept walking. I want to be honest about that. My first instinct was to keep walking, because you learn fast working in a hospital-adjacent building that people outside at night sometimes have complicated situations, and getting involved in complicated situations is not something I'm built for. But she looked at me when I was about 10 feet away, and something about the blankness on her face made me stop. "You okay?" I said. "Brilliant opener." "My Uber canceled," she said. "Twice. Where are you going?" She told me a neighborhood. It was about 20 minutes from where we were, toward the south side. She was looking at her phone again, squinting at it. "Do you want me to call someone for you?" I asked. "There's nobody to call." She said it plainly, without drama, which somehow made it worse. I stood there for a moment doing what my father would have called the math. She wasn't falling down drunk. She was more in that particular register of too much wine at dinner, and now everything is bleak. She was coherent. She knew her address, but she also had no shoes on, and it was 46 degrees, and she had that specific quality of stillness that people get when they've given up on the next 5 minutes working out. "I can drive you," I said. She looked at me for the first time like she was actually seeing me. "You work here?" "Outpatient PT. I was just leaving." She thought about it. "That's either very kind or very creepy." "I get that a lot," I said, which made her laugh a little, just a small exhale through her nose. But it counted. Her name was Celeste. She told me that on the walk to my car, shoes back on, walking carefully across the parking deck. She didn't offer a last name, and I didn't ask. She sat in the passenger seat and gave me her address through Google Maps on her own phone, which I thought was smart, keeping the record on her end, and I didn't comment on it. We drove mostly in silence. She had the window cracked despite the cold, and I didn't say anything about that either. About halfway there, she's visiting my mother. She had a procedure, to minor thing. But it's still your mom," I said. "Yeah." A pause. I had a drink after, or 3. I was going to take a car, but I waited too long, and then the cancellations. "Is your mom okay?" "She'll be fine. Home in the morning, probably." She was looking out the window. "Thank you for this. You didn't have to, I know." When we got to her building, a newer mid-rise, with one of those glass lobbies that's lit up at night like a display case, she turned to me before getting out. She had gathered herself back together somewhat. The blankness was gone. "Can I pay you for gas or something?" "No, go sleep. Call your mom in the morning." She smiled at that, a real one this time. She got out, then leaned back in through the door. "I'm serious, thank you. You're a good person." I drove home and did not think about it in any significant way. I'd done the right call, the uncomfortable one. My father would have approved. That was the end of it, except it wasn't. I should tell you about my job before I tell you the rest of it. I'd been at Pinnacle Sports Rehab for about 2 years. It was a good clinic, well run, with a decent mix of post-surgical patients, athletes, and general orthopedic cases. The clinical director, the person who ran the whole operation, scheduling, staff decisions, insurance negotiations, quality standards, was a woman named Harriet Cobb. She was 60-something, gray-haired, former physical therapist herself before she moved into administration, and she had a particular gift for making you feel like she was simultaneously proud of you and watching you very closely. I respected her. Everyone did. She was exactly the kind of boss you don't want to disappoint. I had met her daughter exactly once, 3 months before the bench outside the hospital. The daughter had stopped by the clinic to drop something off. Brief introduction in the hallway. I registered Harriet's daughter, works in finance somewhere. Name is something that starts with C. I had not retained the name. It came back to me on a Thursday morning, 10 days after I drove Celeste home. I was in the break room at 7:45 a.m., pulling my lunch from the refrigerator when Harriet walked in with a woman I recognized immediately. And the recognition arrived with a cold, specific sensation that started somewhere behind my sternum and worked its way out. Celeste. Dark green coat again, different this time. A blazer actually, coffee in hand, looking completely put together and professional and not at all like someone who had recently been sitting on a stone bench without her shoes on. She saw me at the same moment I saw her. The pause that followed was probably half a second, but it felt considerably longer. "Declan," Harriet said, "you've met my daughter Celeste before, briefly. She's going to be working with us on a consulting engagement for the next few weeks. Billing systems review." "We've met," Celeste said. Her voice was perfectly level. Her eyes were on me, and I could not read them at all. "Good morning," I said. It was the best I had. The next 2 days were uncomfortable in a very specific way. I was professional about it because there was nothing else to be. I said good morning when I passed her in the hallway. I did my job. I ate lunch at my desk. I did not go out of my way to talk to her, and she did not come looking for me, which I told myself was exactly right, and did not think about more than necessary. On the third day, she knocked on the door of the small PT office I shared with another therapist, Remy, who happened to be out with a patient. She was carrying 2 coffees. "I didn't know how you take it," she said. "I got 1 black and 1 with oat milk, and a little sugar, you pick." I took the black. She sat in Remy's chair without being invited, which I noticed. "I want to make sure we're okay," she said. "We're fine," I said. "I didn't know you worked here when you drove me home. I didn't recognize you from the one time we'd met in the hall." "I know. I didn't recognize you either. And I didn't tell my mother. She was watching me carefully. About that night. She doesn't know." I looked at her. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to know you don't have to worry about some awkward conversation with Harriet where she finds out and it gets strange. As far as she knows, we've met twice, once here and once at her house a couple years ago." A small pause. "You were kind to me. I'm not going to make that weird for you." I thought about that for a moment. "Okay," I said. "Okay." She picked up her coffee. For what it's worth, I was embarrassed for about 48 hours after that night. The bench. The shoes. "You were having a hard night." "I was having a hard night," she agreed. She said it like she was closing a door on it gently, not slamming it. "My mother's fine, by the way. Home the next morning like she said she would be. I'm glad." She stood up to leave, then in the doorway, "The coffee is a thank you. Not a bribe, not an apology, just thank you." She was gone before I could think of anything to say back. The consulting engagement lasted 6 weeks. Billing systems review turned into a broader operational audit, which meant Celeste was in the building more than originally planned. She set up in the small conference room near the front desk. I passed it, probably a dozen times a day. We started talking. Not about anything significant at first. She'd ask if the break room had more creamer. I'd ask if the construction noise from the lot next door was affecting her calls. The kind of conversations that happen when 2 people occupy the same building and have no particular reason to avoid each other. Then one week she came to ask me something about discharge documentation, a question for the audit. I walked her through it, and that turned into a 20-minute conversation about how insurance coding worked and why some of our patients were getting bills they shouldn't have been getting. She was sharp. Not sharp in a performing for the room way, but the kind of sharp that just comes through when someone is genuinely interested in a problem. "You actually care whether the billing is right," she said, like it had surprised her. "Of course I do. These are my patients." She looked at me for a moment. "A lot of clinicians treat the admin stuff as someone else's problem. It affects people's recovery," I said. "If someone gets an unexpected bill in week 2 of post-surgical PT, they start wondering if they can afford week 3. That affects outcomes." She wrote something down in her notebook. I didn't ask what. We started having lunch sometimes, separately but often at the same time, in the break room, and conversation would start. I found out she lived about 3 miles from the hospital where I'd found her, that she'd been in consulting for 8 years, that she had a dog named after a character from a 70s film. She wouldn't tell me the name of, that she'd wanted to be a marine biologist until she was 17, and then her father died. and she switched to something more practical because her mother needed her to. That last one came out quietly, on a Thursday, over bad break room coffee, and she said it without looking for sympathy. Just the fact of it laid flat. 17, that's a hard age to have to be practical. Yeah? She looked at her cup, but I like what I do, so it worked out. I believed her. That was the thing about Celeste. She said things she meant. No performance, no angling. She said what was actually true. I was, somewhere around that Thursday, becoming aware that I looked forward to running into her in the building, which I noted and did not do anything about, because she was my boss's daughter, and she was there on a professional engagement, and I was not the kind of person who complicated things. There was a person on our staff named Troy Bauer. I want to be careful about how I describe Troy Bauer. He was a billing coordinator. He'd been at Pinnacle for about 4 years, and he was the kind of person who understood the organizational chart as a map of territory rather than a description of responsibilities. He was friendly to Harriet. He was less friendly in barely perceptible ways to everyone else. He had applied for a promotion to billing manager the previous year and not gotten it, and had been visibly adjusted in his affect ever since. He started paying attention to Celeste and me in a way I noticed around week 3 of her engagement. Small things. Lingering near the break room when we were in there. Showing up in the hallway at moments when we'd just been talking. Making a point to mention, in front of others, how often he was helping with the audit. Then one afternoon I was back from a patient session, and I passed the front desk and overheard him talking to our office manager, Bridge. He wasn't being quiet enough. "She's always in there with Declan," he said. "I don't know, I just think someone should probably be aware. It seems like a dynamic." Bridget said something I didn't catch. "I'm just saying. She's Harriet's daughter. If something's going on, Harriet should know." I kept walking. I did not stop or turn around. I thought about my father's thing about the right call being the uncomfortable one, and I thought about whether this was one of those moments, and I decided it wasn't yet. It was gossip. Let it be gossip. The following Monday, Troy made his move. I didn't witness it directly. What I know is this. Harriet called me into her office at 2 p.m. She was sitting behind her desk with the particular expression she got when something had been brought to her attention that she wished hadn't been. Troy was not in the room. Celeste was not in the room. It was just Harriet and me. "Declan," she said, "I want to ask you something directly, and I'd appreciate a direct answer." Of course, Troy came to me this morning. He said he's observed what he described as a personal relationship developing between you and Celeste that goes beyond the professional scope of her engagement here. I let that sit for a moment. "Troy is mistaken," I said. "He said he's seen you having lunch together, one-on-one, on multiple occasions. Extended conversations in your office. We've talked during the audit. She had questions about documentation and billing that were in my area. And yes, we've had lunch in the break room a few times. There are usually other people in there." Harriet looked at me steadily. She wasn't hostile. She was doing what she was good at, which was getting to the truth of something. "Declan, I'm not asking you to be honest with me. I am being honest with you." I paused. "I like your daughter, Harriet. She's smart and she's good at her job and she's easy to talk to. If that's developed into something that looks like friendship, that's probably accurate. But nothing has happened that would compromise the audit or create a conflict of interest." Another pause. "If you'd like me to keep more distance while she's finishing the engagement, I will." "That's your call." Harriet was quiet for a moment, then she said, "I appreciate your honesty." I nodded. "You can go." I went. I want to tell you that I went home that night and felt fine about it. I didn't. I felt the specific misery of someone who has been careful and still ended up in a room explaining themselves. I'd done nothing wrong, and the explanation had still been uncomfortable, and I resented Troy Bauer in a way that felt both justified and small. I also called Celeste, which I hadn't done before. I had her number from an audit-related text she'd sent me 2 weeks earlier. I sent a message. "Harriet called me in today. I want you to know what I told her. Can we talk?" She called me within 4 minutes. I told her what had happened, all of it, including what I'd said and what I'd held back. When I finished, there was a pause. "Troy," she said, "it wasn't really a question. I can't confirm that's who it was. I can. He's been strange around me since the beginning. I think he wanted to be the main point of contact for the audit, and it didn't work out that way." Another pause. "What did you tell her? About us, that we've talked, that I consider it a friendship, that nothing has compromised the audit. Is that accurate?" "Yes," I said. And then, because I was tired of being careful, although I'd be lying if I said the friendship part wasn't something I've been thinking about more than is strictly professional. A long pause. Okay, she said. That's honest. I figured now was a good time for it. Declan. Her voice was quieter. I need to finish this engagement. 4 more days. Can you give me 4 more days and then we can figure out what any of this is without my mother being a variable? Yes, I said. I can do that. Here is what I did not expect. Harriet called Celeste in the next morning. Celeste told me about it later, the whole thing. She said Harriet had done something that Celeste didn't think she'd ever seen her mother do. She'd sat down across from her daughter and said, I want to hear it from you. Celeste told her everything, including the night outside the hospital, including the bench and the shoes and Declan Ford driving her home without asking for anything in return, including the coffee the next day and every lunch in the break room after that. Harriet, Celeste said, was quiet for a very long time. Then she said, Why didn't you tell me? Because I was embarrassed. About needing help. About you finding out I needed it. Another silence. Then Harriet said, He drove you home and didn't tell me. No. And he's been getting to know you for 6 weeks without using it. Yes. Harriet apparently thought about this for a while. Celeste said her mother looked out the window for a long moment, like she was doing some kind of calculation. Then she said, Troy is going to be moved off any billing-related work going forward. I want you to know that. Mom. He manufactured a problem because he didn't get what he wanted. That's not something I allow in this building. A pause. As for the other thing, the Declan thing, Mom, I'm not saying anything. I'm just noting that the fact that he said nothing, to me, about that night about any of it tells me something about his character. She paused again. I'm not saying anything. Celeste finished the engagement on a Friday. She came to say goodbye to the staff she'd worked with, left a card for Harriet's assistant, dropped off a box of pastries from a place she'd found in Noda. She stopped by my doorway last. 4 days, she said. 4 days, I said. I'm going to text you tonight. And it's not going to be about billing documentation. Okay. She looked at me the way she had that first night on the drive over, like she was deciding something. You're a strange person, Declan Ford. How so? You do the right thing and then you don't tell anyone about it. Most people can't do that. My father used to say the right call is usually the uncomfortable one. Smart man, he was. She nodded once, like that settled something, and then she left. I heard her heels on the hallway floor and then the front door, and then it was just the ordinary sounds of the clinic again. She texted at 7:14 that evening, just her name typed out and then, dinner? I said yes. We went to a place she'd been wanting to try, a small southern Italian spot in Plaza Midwood that had maybe 12 tables and no reservations, and we waited at the bar for 40 minutes and neither of us minded. We talked the way people talk when they've been building towards something for a while, and have finally cleared enough space to do it properly. She told me about her father. I told her about mine. She told me about a relationship that had ended badly 2 years ago, someone she'd trusted who turned out to be a different person than advertised. I told her I understood that in a general way without having a specific story to match it. At some point she said, Can I ask you something? Sure. That night. Why did you stop? Most people don't stop. I thought about it. You had your shoes off, I said. It was 46 degrees. She laughed at that, a real one, the kind that surprised her. That's it, the shoes? That was the thing that made it concrete, I said. I could have kept walking past someone sitting on a bench. I couldn't keep walking past someone sitting in the cold without their shoes. She looked at me across the table. My mother likes you, for what it's worth. She hasn't said it in those words. But I can tell. How? She stopped justifying to me why I should keep my distance from people I work adjacent to. A small smile. For Harriet, that's basically a proclamation. I thought about Harriet in her office asking me directly, listening to me, then going to find out for herself. A woman who ran a clinic like she was responsible for every single thing in it, because she was, and who had taken one person's word about another person's character, and then gone looking for the truth instead of just accepting the complaint. She's a good person, I said. She is. Celeste picked up her wine. So are you. In case nobody's told you recently, you told me once before. On a driveway, I didn't even know your last name. Still counted, I said. Troy Bauer resigned 6 weeks later. I was not told why and I didn't ask. Bridget, our office manager, said something brief about a new direction, and then his cube was empty, and then there was a new billing coordinator named someone I never quite caught, and that was that. Harriet never mentioned the conversation in her office again. What she did do about a month after Celeste's engagement ended was stop me in the hallway and say plainly, as though she were telling me something about scheduling, "Celeste is coming for Thanksgiving. My brother's family will be there. I usually do it Thursday, but this year we may do Saturday." She looked at me. Anyway, she kept walking. I stood in the hallway for a moment. Then I went back to my office and I sent Celeste a message that said, "Your mother just told me you're doing Thanksgiving on Saturday this year. I think she was telling me something." Celeste replied, "She absolutely was." And I thought about my father. I thought about the uncomfortable call and the right call, and how he always said they were the same call if you paid enough attention. "I'd like to meet your uncle," I wrote back. 3 dots appeared. Then, "He's going to love you. He hates everyone." I laughed at that in my empty office, and for the first time in a while, everything felt exactly the right size.